My son looked at me like I was a piece of broken furniture cluttering his perfect house. "Dad, just stay in your room today. Don't make a fuss." I nodded and smiled. But that afternoon, I walked to the bank and asked them to open the old envelope I left there in 1996. What he got in the mail a week later made him go pale. It was a Tuesday morning when Mark said those words. His wife, Linda, was rushing around the kitchen checking her phone every few seconds. They had important clients coming over, some deal that would change everything, as Mark kept saying. I was sitting at the small table by the window, the same spot where I'd eaten breakfast for the past 3 years, ever since I moved in with them after the heart attack. "The Richardsons are very particular people," Linda said, not looking at me. "They notice details." I understood. I was the detail that didn't fit. Mark poured himself coffee from the machine, the expensive one I'd bought them for Christmas. He didn't offer me any. These days, I made my own coffee in a chipped mug I'd brought from the old house. Everything else here was theirs, clean, modern, coordinated. "Dad," Mark said again, softer this time, like he was talking to a child. "You understand, right? It's just for today. Tomorrow, you can sit wherever you want." I nodded again. "Of course, son." But something in my chest tightened. Not the heart. That was working fine now. Something else. Something I'd been carrying for 27 years, wrapped up tight and stored away like winter clothes you hope you'll never need again. I watched him through the window as he loaded his briefcase into the BMW. Linda followed, checking her reflection in the side mirror. They looked successful, confident, ready to conquer the world. They drove away without looking back. I finished my coffee and washed the mug, dried it, put it back on the shelf behind the good dishes. Then I walked to my room, the small guest room at the back of the house, where the afternoon sun never quite reached. From the dresser drawer under my old sweaters, I pulled out a small brass key. It was tarnished now, but still solid, still real. I'd carried it with me for 3 years, through the heart attack, through selling my house, through every day of living in this room that smelled like air freshener and felt like a waiting room. I put on my coat, the good one, navy blue wool, that Linda always said was too formal for grocery shopping. But I wasn't going to the grocery store. The bank was 6 blocks away. I walked slowly, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to think. 27 years ago, I'd made a decision, a hard one. I'd hoped every day since then that I'd never need to use what I'd put away. But hopes and sons, I'd learned, don't always grow the way you plant them. I sat in my room until I heard the BMW pull back into the driveway. Through the thin walls, I could hear Mark's voice, animated, excited. The meeting had gone well. Linda's heels clicked across the hardwood as she headed straight for the kitchen to start dinner. "Dad," Mark called out, "you can come out now. They're gone." Come out? Like I was a dog who'd been put away for company. I stayed where I was for another 10 minutes, listening to them celebrate. Linda was already on the phone with someone, probably her sister, telling her about the amazing opportunity they'd just secured. Mark was opening a bottle of wine. The good bottle, the one from the top shelf that I wasn't supposed to touch. When I finally emerged, they were sitting at the dining table with papers spread everywhere. Contracts, maybe, or blueprints. Mark looked up at me with that smile he'd perfected, the one that said he was pleased with me for being good. Sorry about that, Dad. You know how it is. Business. I nodded. How did it go? Incredible. The Richardsons want to invest in the new development. This could be the break we've been waiting for. He gestured to the chair at the far end of the table, the one that used to be mine before it became the extra chair. Sit, I'll tell you about it. So I sat and listened while my son explained his future. Their future. It was impressive, I had to admit. Smart. Strategic. Everything I'd taught him about business, but bigger. Bolder. The only thing is, Linda said, refilling her wineglass, we'll need to do a lot more entertaining. Important people. You understand? I understood. Maybe it's time, Mark said carefully, to think about other arrangements. For you, I mean. There are some very nice places, assisted living facilities, more social. You'd have people your own age to talk to. I looked at him, really looked. When had his eyes become so cold? When had his voice taken on that tone, the one that made everything sound reasonable when it wasn't reasonable at all? I see, I said. It's not that we don't want you here, Linda added quickly. It's just that we need the space for an office, for guests, and you'd be happier somewhere more suitable. Suitable, like furniture that didn't match the decor. I finished my dinner, leftover chicken that had gone slightly dry in the microwave. Then I went back to my room and pulled out the brass key again. This time, I didn't just hold it, I put it in my pocket. That night, I lay awake listening to them plan my exile. Their voices carried through the walls. Excited whispers about square footage and guest bedrooms and how much easier everything would be. In the morning, while they were both at work, I walked to First National Bank. The walk to First National took me past the old elementary school where Mark had learned to ride his bike in the parking lot. Past the diner where we used to get pancakes on Sunday mornings after his mother died. Past the corner where he'd wait for the school bus, lunch money folded carefully in his small fist. Funny how a neighborhood holds on to memories even when the people in it let them go. Mrs. Patterson was still working at the bank after all these years. Her hair had gone completely silver, but she recognized me immediately. Not the way people recognize you when they're trying to be polite. The way they recognize someone who mattered. Mr. David Hartley, she said, standing up from behind her desk. It's been too long. Hello, Margaret. I need to access my safety deposit box. She didn't ask questions, just pulled out the signature cards and led me down the familiar hallway to the vault. The brass key turned easily, like it had been waiting. Inside the metal box were 2 sealed envelopes, both yellowed with age, both marked with dates in my own handwriting. October 15th, 1996, and if needed. I'd hoped for 27 years I'd never see that second one again. I took both envelopes to the small private room they provided, opened the first one with hands that barely trembled. Inside were documents I'd signed on the worst and best day of my business life. The day I sold Hartley Construction to Global Properties for $12 million. The day I chose my son over my company. Mark had been 25 then, fresh out of college with big ideas and bigger debts. He'd wanted to expand, to modernize, to turn my small but successful construction business into something that could compete with the national firms. I'd seen the numbers. I'd known what it would cost, what it would risk. I'd also seen something else in my son's eyes, a hunger that had nothing to do with building houses and everything to do with building an image of himself he could live with. So I'd made a choice, sold the company to men who promised to keep our workers employed and our projects running, took the money and put most of it away where Mark would never have to know it existed, where he could build his own success without the weight of mine pressing down on him, where he could choose to love me for who I was, not what I could give him. I'd kept enough to buy a small house, to live modestly, to help when he needed it, but never enough to make him dependent, never enough to make him wonder if his achievements were really his own. For 27 years, I'd watched him struggle and succeed and struggle again. I'd watched him build his real estate business from nothing, through pure determination and the lessons I'd taught him, but never the shortcuts I could have bought him. I'd been proud, but pride, I was learning, could be a dangerous thing to invest in. The second envelope felt heavier in my hands, though it contained only a single sheet of paper, a deed to a house at 247 Maple Street, a house I'd bought with cash in 1996 and never lived in, a house that had been sitting empty, maintained by a property management company, waiting for a purpose I'd hoped would never come, the house I was going to need now. I folded both sets of documents and put them in my coat pocket, signed the paperwork for Margaret, shook her hand. "Will we be seeing you again soon?" she asked. "I don't think so," I said, "but thank you for everything." Outside, the October air had a bite to it that reminded me of other Octobers, better ones. I walked home slowly, taking a different route, past the hardware store where Mark and I used to buy supplies for weekend projects, past the park where I'd taught him to throw a baseball, past all the places where I'd been a father instead of a burden. When I got back to the house, Mark's BMW was in the driveway. Early day at the office, apparently. I could hear voices from the kitchen, his and Linda's and someone else. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. I went around to the back door, the one that led directly to my room. I didn't want to interrupt whatever meeting was happening. I'd learned to be very careful about not interrupting. But as I passed under the kitchen window, I heard my name. "The thing is," Linda was saying, "David is really declining. We're worried about his safety. Living alone just isn't an option anymore." I stopped walking. "I understand completely," the strange woman's voice replied. "Many families struggle with this transition. Sunset Manor is specifically designed for situations like this. We have immediate openings, and our staff is trained to help residents adjust to their new living situation." Sunset Manor. I knew that place. Drove past it every week on the way to the grocery store. Institutional brick building with small windows and a parking lot full of cars that never moved. "The paperwork is fairly straightforward," the woman continued. "As his son, you can make the arrangements. We just need his medical records and insurance information." "What about his consent?" Mark asked. There was a pause, a long one. "Well, of course, it's always preferable when residents are enthusiastic about the move. But in cases where cognitive decline is a factor—" Another pause. "We find that sometimes what seems like resistance is really just confusion, fear of change. Once they're settled, most residents are much happier." I stood very still under that window, listening to them plan my disappearance. "How soon could you take him?" Linda asked. "We could have everything arranged by next week." Next week, I went to my room and sat on the bed for a long time, holding those two envelopes. 27 years ago, I'd made one choice. Today, I was going to make another one. But first, I was going to pack. I walked into the house through the front door this time. No more sneaking around the back like an unwelcome visitor in a place I'd helped pay for. The voices from the kitchen stopped as soon as I appeared in the doorway. Mark looked up from the dining table where he sat with Linda and a woman in a navy blue suit, who was clearly not from their usual business circle. She had the professional smile and careful posture of someone who dealt with difficult family situations for a living. "Dad," Mark said, standing up quickly. "Perfect timing. I'd like you to meet Mrs. Rodriguez from Sunset Manor. We were just talking about some options that might be good for you." Mrs. Rodriguez extended her hand with practiced warmth. "Mr. Hartley, it's so nice to meet you. Your son has told me wonderful things about you." I shook her hand and sat down in the chair they'd left empty for me, the one at the foot of the table like a defendant facing a tribunal. "Options," I repeated, looking at Mark. Linda shifted in her seat, her fingers drumming against her wine glass. "We've been thinking, David, about what we discussed yesterday, about you being happier somewhere with people your own age. Sunset Manor is a beautiful facility," Mrs. Rodriguez said, pulling out a glossy brochure and sliding it across the table to me. "We have activities, social programs, and full medical support. Many of our residents tell us they wish they'd made the transition sooner." I opened the brochure. Smiling elderly faces engaged in arts and crafts, a dining room with round tables and plastic flowers, a common area with a television mounted too high on the wall, everything designed to be safe and clean and absolutely soul-crushing. "The cost is very reasonable," Mrs. Rodriguez continued, "especially when you factor in what families save on utilities, groceries, property taxes. Many of our residents find they actually come out ahead financially." I looked up at Mark. "And my room here?" "Well," Linda said, not meeting my eyes, "we could really use the space. Mark's business is expanding, and we need a proper home office. Plus, with the entertaining we'll be doing." "Of course," I said. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward slightly. "I understand this can feel overwhelming, Mr. Hartley. Change always is, especially at our age. But I want you to know that Sunset Manor isn't just a place to live. It's a community. You'd have friends, activities, purpose." Purpose? I almost laughed. I'd spent 40 years building houses that sheltered families, raising a son who was now trying to warehouse me, and creating a business that employed 37 people before I sold it. But apparently, at 67, I needed strangers to give me purpose. "Can I think about it?" I asked. Mark and Linda exchanged a look. "Of course," Mark said. "But Mrs. Rodriguez was saying they have limited availability. If we wait too long, we could hold a spot for 2 weeks," Mrs. Rodriguez said helpfully. "That would give you time to adjust to the idea while ensuring you don't miss this opportunity." Opportunity. Another interesting word choice. "What would I need to bring?" I asked. Mrs. Rodriguez brightened, clearly taking this as progress. "Just personal items, clothes, photos, maybe a favorite chair if it fits our guidelines. We provide everything else. Bedding, meals, activities, medical care. It's really quite comprehensive." "And visitors?" "Oh, absolutely. We encourage family involvement. There are visiting hours every day from 2 to 8 p.m. Visiting hours, like a hospital or a prison. I'll need to pack, I said, standing up. Dad, Mark said, relief evident in his voice. This is really the best thing. You'll see. You'll be much happier. I nodded and headed toward my room. Behind me, I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez explaining procedures and Linda asking about meal plans and Mark expressing gratitude for making this transition so smooth. In my room, I pulled my old suitcase from under the bed, the same one I'd used for business trips back when I had a business to trip for. I packed methodically, clothes, toiletries, the few photographs I'd brought from my old house. At the bottom of the case, wrapped in an old T-shirt, I placed the 2 envelopes from the bank. There was a soft knock on my door. Mark came in without waiting for permission. Dad, I want you to know this isn't easy for us either. But Linda's right. You'll be safer there, happier, and we'll visit all the time. I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had his jaw gotten so tight? When had his eyes learned to avoid mine when he was lying? I know you will, I said. He seemed surprised by my calm acceptance. Good. That's good. Mrs. Rodriguez says they can have everything ready by Friday. That gives you a few days to get used to the idea. Friday, I repeated. And Dad? Thank you for understanding, for making this easy. After he left, I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. The old one that Linda always complained was too slow, but that still worked perfectly fine for what I needed. I pulled up the contact information for Morrison Property Management, the company that had been maintaining 247 Maple Street for the past 27 years. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Morrison Property Management, this is Jake. Jake, this is David Hartley. Mr. Hartley, haven't heard from you in months. How's everything going? I need to activate the Maple Street property, full utilities, phone, internet, and I'll need the locks changed. There was a pause. Of course, sir. May I ask, are you planning to move in? Yes. Well, that's wonderful news. The house is in perfect condition. We've kept up with all the maintenance just like you requested. When would you like everything ready? Thursday. This Thursday? That's ambitious, but we can make it happen. What about furnishing? The place is still empty, except for basic appliances. I thought about that. About the years of accumulating things that made a house feel like home. About the way Linda had looked at my old recliner like it was an eyesore. About the chipped coffee mug I'd been relegated to using. I'll handle the furnishing, I said. Just make sure it's livable. You got it, Mr. Hartley. Anything else? Yes, send the activation confirmation to my email, not to the billing address. And Jake, I'd appreciate discretion about this. Understood, sir. You can count on us. After I hung up, I made 3 more calls. The first to a furniture rental company, the second to a grocery delivery service, the third to a locksmith who remembered me from the old days and promised to meet me at the house Thursday morning. No questions asked. By the time I finished, Linda was calling everyone to dinner. I'd joined them at the table. The last time I realized that I'd sit in this particular chair in this particular room with these particular people. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Mark talked about his business prospects. Linda discussed a decorator she wanted to hire for the home office that would replace my room. Mrs. Rodriguez, apparently invited to stay for dinner, shared heartwarming stories about residents who'd found new purpose at Sunset Manor. No one asked me what I thought about any of it. After dinner, I helped Linda clear the dishes, something I'd done every night for 3 years, but that she seemed surprised by tonight. "You don't have to do that, David," she said. "You should relax. Enjoy your last few days here." Last few days. She said it like I was dying instead of just being discarded. "I don't mind," I said. But as I loaded the dishwasher with plates I'd never eat from again and glasses I'd never drink from again, I found myself thinking about the house on Maple Street, about rooms that would be mine again, about decisions that would be mine to make, about a life that would be mine to live. That night, I dreamed about my wife Sarah for the first time in months. She was standing in a kitchen I didn't recognize, sunlight streaming through windows that looked out on a garden I'd never seen. She was smiling, not the careful, brave smile she'd worn during the cancer treatments, but the real one, the one that had made me fall in love with her 42 years ago. "You always were too patient for your own good," she said in the dream. When I woke up, the brass key was still in my hand. Thursday morning came with the kind of crisp October air that made everything feel possible. I woke up before dawn, dressed in my good clothes, the navy wool coat Linda hated, the leather shoes I'd polished the night before, the watch Sarah had given me for our 20th anniversary. I left the house while Mark and Linda were still sleeping. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just a note on the kitchen table next to my house key. "Gone to handle some business. We'll be in touch soon." "Dad!" The locksmith was already waiting at 247 Maple Street when I arrived. Tommy Chen, I'd hired his father to install security systems in my construction projects 20 years ago. He recognized me immediately. "Mr. Hartley," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Jake from Morrison said you needed new locks. Smart move. These old ones were probably installed when the house was built." I looked up at the house I'd bought, but never lived in. 2 stories of solid brick and oak trim, with a wraparound porch and windows that actually opened. A house built when people expected things to last. Jake had kept his word. The paint was fresh, the gutters clean, the small front garden neatly maintained. "How long will it take?" I asked Tommy. "Couple hours for all the exterior doors and windows." "You want a security system too?" I thought about that, about Mark having my address, about the conversation I'd overheard about Sunset Manor and immediate openings and paperwork that didn't require my consent. "Yes," I said, "the works." While Tommy worked, I walked through rooms that felt familiar, despite being empty. The kitchen had windows over the sink that looked out on a backyard big enough for a garden. The living room had a fireplace that had never been lit and built-in bookshelves waiting for books. Upstairs, the master bedroom had a view of the street and morning light that would make it easy to wake up naturally. It felt like a house where someone could live a real life instead of just waiting to die. The furniture rental truck arrived at 10. 2 young men unloaded basics: a bed, a table and chairs, a comfortable recliner, a television I'd probably never watch. Not much, but enough. More than enough. By noon, I had electricity, heat, running water, and internet. I had food in the refrigerator and coffee in the cabinet and fresh sheets on a bed that was mine to sleep in for as long as I chose. I also had 17 missed calls on my phone. The first message was from Mark, left at 8:30. Dad, where are you? Your note was pretty vague. Call me back. The second was from Linda at 9:15. David, this isn't funny. Mrs. Rodriguez is coming by this afternoon to finalize the paperwork. You need to be here. By the fifth message, Mark's voice had gotten tight. Dad, seriously, where are you? We're starting to worry. By the 10th, Linda was no longer asking, David, you need to come home right now. We have responsibilities to Mrs. Rodriguez. She's been very patient with us. The 17th message was from Mark again, left just 20 minutes earlier. Dad, if you don't call back in the next hour, I'm calling the police. This isn't a game. I turned off the phone and made myself a sandwich. Turkey and Swiss on bread that wasn't stale. Coffee from a mug that wasn't chipped. I ate, standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at a backyard where no one would tell me I was taking up too much space. At 2 o'clock, I drove to the bank. Margaret Patterson was working the afternoon shift, and she smiled when she saw me. Back so soon, Mr. Hartley? I need to make some arrangements, I said. Financial ones. She led me to her desk, and I explained what I needed. It wasn't complicated, really. Just a change of address for my accounts, a few automatic payments to be set up, the activation of credit cards that had been sitting dormant since I'd moved in with Mark. The address on Maple Street, Margaret said, typing into her computer. That's been your backup address for years, hasn't it? It has. May I ask, are you moving there permanently? I thought about that question, about the house I'd just spent the morning making livable, about the son who'd been planning to warehouse me at Sunset Manor, about the choice I'd made 27 years ago and the choice I was making now. Yes, I said, I am. Margaret nodded, like this made perfect sense. Would you like me to send a change of address notification to any other parties? Insurance companies? Social Security? That sort of thing? Yes. And Margaret, if anyone calls asking about my accounts or my whereabouts, you don't know anything. She gave me a look that was both professional and conspiratorial. Know anything about what, Mr. Hartley? I was back at the house by 4, unloading groceries from my car, when Mark's BMW pulled into the driveway. He got out slowly, like he was approaching a crime scene. Linda stayed in the passenger seat, her phone pressed to her ear. Dad, Mark said, walking up the front path. What is this place? It's my house, I said, setting a bag of groceries on the porch steps. Your house? What do you mean, your house? You live with us. I lived with you, I corrected. Now I live here. Mark looked around like he was trying to process information that didn't compute. How do you have a house? When did you buy a house? With what money? I picked up the groceries and walked to the front door, put the new key in the new lock. I bought it a long time ago. But Mark followed me onto the porch. You sold your house when you moved in with us. You said you didn't have enough money to live independently. You said the heart attack had wiped out your savings. I turned to look at my son, really look at him, at the confusion in his eyes, the way his mouth was working like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't add up. I said I couldn't afford to live in the old house, I said carefully. I never said I couldn't afford to live. But the medical bills were paid. The assisted living costs won't be necessary. Mark's face was cycling through emotions, confusion, anger, something that might have been embarrassment. "Dad, you can't just disappear like this. Mrs. Rodriguez has been waiting all afternoon. She drove over specially to complete the paperwork. Then she wasted a trip." "This is ridiculous," Linda called from the car, having apparently finished her phone conversation. "David, you're not thinking clearly. You can't live alone. You're 67 years old with a heart condition." I opened the front door and stepped inside my house. My house with my furniture and my food and my choices. "Linda," I said, not unkindly, "I survived 64 years before my heart attack and 3 years since. I think I can manage." Mark pushed past me into the living room, looking around like he was taking inventory. "Where did all this furniture come from? How did you arrange all this?" "I made some phone calls." "With what phone? You don't have a phone plan." I pulled my phone out of my pocket, the same phone I'd been using for 3 years, the one with a plan I'd been paying for myself, but letting them think they were paying for because it made them feel better about helping their poor dependent father. Mark stared at the phone like it was evidence of a crime. "I don't understand any of this." "I know you don't. Explain it to me." I set the groceries on the kitchen counter and started putting things away in cabinets that were empty and waiting. 27 years ago, I made some decisions. Good ones, as it turns out. "What decisions?" "Decisions about how to take care of myself without being a burden to my children." The word burden hung in the air between us. Mark's face went very still. "Dad, you're not a burden. We never said you were a burden." I turned to face him. "Yesterday morning, you told me to stay in my room so I wouldn't embarrass you in front of your clients. Yesterday afternoon, Linda told a stranger that I was declining and couldn't live safely alone. Yesterday evening, you both sat at the dinner table planning to move me to an assisted living facility without asking what I wanted." "That's not—" Mark started, then stopped. "We were trying to do what's best for you." "No," I said, opening a package of coffee and breathing in the smell of it. "You were trying to do what's easiest for you. There's a difference." Linda appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed. "This is absurd, David. You can't just run away like a teenager. We have responsibilities to each other. Family responsibilities." I looked at her. This woman who'd made it clear for 3 years that I was an inconvenience in her home, who'd cataloged every space I took up and every dollar I cost, who'd planned my exile over dinner while I sat at the same table. "You're right," I said. "We do have responsibilities to each other. I've been meeting mine for 3 years. Now it's your turn." "What does that mean?" I poured water into the coffee maker and hit the start button. The sound filled the kitchen, normal, domestic, peaceful. "It means I'm going to live my life, and you're going to live yours, separately." Mark was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Dad, this is crazy. You can't afford this." "Whatever money you think you have." "Mark," I said very quietly, "stop talking about my money." Something in my voice made him step back. Something he maybe hadn't heard for a long time, or maybe had forgotten, was there. The coffee finished brewing. I poured myself a cup in a new mug and sat down at my new table in my new kitchen in my old house. "I think," I said, "it's time for you to leave." They left, not immediately. There was more arguing, more demands for explanations, more threats about calling doctors and lawyers and people who knew better than I did what was good for me. But eventually, they left. And I sat in my house, drinking my coffee, watching the afternoon light move across walls that were mine to paint any color I wanted. Tomorrow, I thought, I'd go buy some books for those empty shelves, maybe some plants for the windows, maybe a bird feeder for the backyard. Tomorrow, I'd start living again. But tonight, I was just going to sit in my own chair, in my own house, and remember what it felt like to be home. I woke up Saturday morning to the sound of birds I hadn't heard in 3 years. Real birds, not the mechanical chirping of Linda's decorative clock, or the distant hum of traffic from Mark's busy street. These were the sounds of a neighborhood where people had lived long enough to plant trees that grew tall enough for birds to actually want to nest in them. I made coffee in my new kitchen and carried it out to the front porch, settling into the wooden chair that had come with the rental furniture. The morning was cool but not cold, and I could see neighbors starting their weekend routines. An elderly woman across the street was watering her flower boxes. A middle-aged man 2 houses down was washing his car while his dog supervised from the shade. Normal life. The kind I'd almost forgotten existed. My phone had been buzzing intermittently since dawn, but I left it inside. Whatever Mark and Linda needed to say could wait until I'd finished my coffee and decided whether I wanted to hear it. At 9:30, I finally retrieved the phone. 14 new messages. The first few were from Mark, increasingly frantic. The later ones were from Linda, increasingly angry. The most recent was from a number I didn't recognize, but the voicemail made it clear. Mrs. Rodriguez from Sunset Manor, wondering about the status of my placement. I deleted all of them without responding. Instead, I called Jake Morrison. "Mr. Hartley," Jake answered on the second ring. "How's the house working out?" "Perfectly. I have a question about the property management contract." "Sure, shoot." "You've been maintaining this place for 27 years on my instructions. Have you ever had any other inquiries about it? Anyone asking questions?" There was a pause. "Actually, yes. Yesterday afternoon, I got a call from someone claiming to be your son. Wanted to know about the property ownership, lease agreements, that sort of thing. I told him he'd need to contact you directly." "Good. Jake, I'm going to need you to update your contact protocols. From now on, no information about this property goes to anyone but me. Not family members, not lawyers, not anyone claiming to act on my behalf. Clear?" "Crystal clear, Mr. Hartley. Anything else?" "Yes. Send me the maintenance records for the past 5 years. I want to see exactly what kind of care this place has been getting." After hanging up, I spent an hour reviewing financial documents I'd been ignoring for 3 years. Bank statements, investment portfolios, Social Security deposits. The numbers told a story I'd almost forgotten. I wasn't just financially stable, I was comfortable. More than comfortable. The heart attack had scared me into thinking I needed help, needed family, needed someone to take care of the details while I focused on getting well. But the heart attack had been 3 years ago, and I'd been well for 2.5 of those years. I'd just been too comfortable being taken care of to notice I didn't need taking care of anymore. Or maybe too afraid of admitting that the people I'd trusted to care for me had been planning to dispose of me. The doorbell rang at 11:15. Through the front window, I could see Mark's BMW in the driveway and 2 figures on my porch. I took my time answering. Mark stood there with a woman I'd never seen before, professional looking, carrying a briefcase, wearing the kind of smile that came with hourly billing rates. "Dad," Mark said, "this is Patricia Wells. She's an elder care attorney. We need to talk." I looked at the woman, then at my son. "No, we don't." "Mr. Hartley," Patricia Wells said, extending her hand, "I specialize in situations like this. Family transitions can be complicated, but there are legal frameworks designed to help." I didn't shake her hand. "I don't need legal help." "Dad, please," Mark said, "just hear us out. 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let them in. They sat on my rental furniture in my living room and proceeded to explain to me why I was making a mistake. Patricia Wells did most of the talking. She had statistics about elderly men living alone, about the risks of social isolation, about the benefits of structured care environments. She had legal precedents about family responsibility and financial guardianship. She had solutions for everything except the one problem that actually mattered. I didn't want their help. "The concern," she said, "is that living alone at your age, with your medical history, puts you and your family at risk. If something happens to you here, if you fall or have another cardiac event, who's going to help you?" "The same people who would help anyone else," I said. "Neighbors, emergency services, friends." "What friends?" Mark asked, and immediately looked like he regretted the question. I studied his face. "What friends?" I repeated. "Interesting question, Mark. When did I lose all my friends?" He shifted uncomfortably. "You didn't lose them. You just, after Mom died, and then the heart attack, you got more isolated." "I got more isolated, or I got moved into a house where I wasn't allowed to make noise, wasn't allowed to have guests, wasn't allowed to live like a person instead of a problem." Patricia Wells cleared her throat. "Mr. Hartley, the issue isn't about blame. It's about practical solutions. Your son is concerned about your welfare, and frankly, the law supports his right to intervene if you're not capable of making sound decisions about your care." Something cold settled in my chest. "Are you suggesting I'm mentally incompetent?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes people in your situation need help recognizing what's in their best interest." I stood up. "Ms. Wells, I'm going to need you to leave my house now." "Dad," Mark said, "we're trying to help you." "No, you're trying to control me. There's a difference." Patricia Wells remained seated, her briefcase balanced on her knees. "Mr. Hartley, if you refuse to cooperate with reasonable care arrangements, your family may need to pursue other legal options, such as guardianship proceedings, mental competency evaluations, court-ordered placement." The room went very quiet. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, a lawn mower starting up somewhere down the street. "I see," I said finally. Mark was staring at his hands. "Dad, it doesn't have to come to that. If you'd just be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I walked to the front door and opened it. "Ms. Wells, thank you for the consultation. Send me a bill." She stood up, clearly not accustomed to being dismissed. "Mr. Hartley, I think you're making a serious mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." After they left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about legal guardianship, about mental competency evaluations, about the ways families could legally disappear inconvenient elderly relatives. Then I made a phone call. Richardson and Associates, a receptive voice answered. I need to speak with James Richardson. May I ask who's calling? David Hartley. He'll remember me. James Richardson had been my attorney for 15 years before I retired. He'd handled the sale of my business, the purchase of this house, the estate planning I'd done after Sarah died. If anyone understood my situation, it would be Jim. David, Jim's voice was warm when he came on the line. I heard through the grapevine that you'd moved in with your son. How's that working out? It's not. Jim, I need legal advice and possibly representation. What's going on? I explained the situation. The assisted living facility, the attorney Mark had brought, the threats about guardianship proceedings. Jim listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. David, he said finally, how's your health? Really? Fine. Good, actually. I see my cardiologist every 6 months, take my medications, walk 2 miles a day. No cognitive issues, no physical limitations that would prevent independent living. And your finances? More than adequate. Then they don't have a case. Guardianship requires proof of incapacity, mental or physical. Disagreeing with your family's preferences isn't incapacity. But they could try? They could try. It would be expensive and time-consuming and ultimately futile. But they could try. The question is whether you want to fight it or prevent it. What do you mean, prevent it? I mean, we document everything, your medical status, your financial competency, your living situation. We create a paper trail that makes it impossible for anyone to claim you're not capable of making your own decisions. And we do it proactively. I'm listening. Come in Monday morning. Bring your medical records, financial statements, anything that demonstrates your competency and independence. We'll draft some documents that will make any future guardianship proceeding very difficult for your family to pursue. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years, the satisfaction of taking control of my own life. That evening, I walked to the neighborhood grocery store, something I hadn't been allowed to do at Mark's house because Linda worried about me wandering around alone. I bought ingredients for a real dinner, not the prepackaged meals or leftovers I'd been living on. As I cooked, really cooked, for the first time in years, I thought about the house I'd bought 27 years ago, but never lived in. About the choice I'd made to be financially invisible so my son could build his own success. About the different choice I was making now. The phone rang while I was eating. Mark's number. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to the message. Dad, I know you're angry. I know this isn't how you wanted things to go, but I need you to understand we're scared. When Mom died, we almost lost you too. The heart attack, the depression afterward, the way you just disappeared for a while. We can't go through that again. We can't lose you. So if keeping you safe means making you angry at us, that's a price we're willing to pay. But please, just call me back. Let's figure this out. I sat with that message for a long time, because buried in all the manipulation and the legal threats and the assisted living brochures was something real. Fear. My son was afraid of losing me the way he'd lost his mother. But fear, I'd learned, could make people do terrible things to the people they claimed to love. I didn't call him back that night. Instead, I sat on my front porch as the sun went down, listening to the sounds of a neighborhood where people lived their own lives in their own houses and made their own choices about how to grow old. Tomorrow, I'd go see Jim Richardson and make sure my legal affairs were bulletproof. I'd get my medical records updated and my financial situation documented. I'd build a fortress of competency that no one could breach. But tonight, I just sat in my chair on my porch and remembered what it felt like to be a person instead of a problem. The elderly woman across the street came out to water her evening flowers. She waved when she saw me, and I waved back. "Beautiful evening," she called across the street. "Yes, it is," I called back. And for the first time in 3 years, I meant it. Later, as I was getting ready for bed, I found myself looking at the framed photo of Sarah I'd placed on the bedside table. In the picture, she was laughing at something I'd said, her eyes bright with the kind of joy that couldn't be faked. "Well," I said to the photo, "I finally learned to stop being so patient for my own good." If she'd been there, I think she would have smiled.